Okay. All right. It is being recorded, so I'll remind you that, and it will be live. So, coming back. Now, this information in terms of transport and vascular plan, remember, we have learned this back, or I have taught you this back in March. Okay, back in March before we did the seed lab. Okay, we talked about transpiration. Now, the thing is this. I want to ask you guys, because we're also very close to the exam, what are some ways that you can study that will help you memorize things, that will help you remember and retain that information? Put up your hand. Yes?
I usually just read things out loud to myself.
Okay, read things out loud over and over again. The exact same thing?
And then I would try, I would look at it, I'd read it, and then I'd try to memorize it and then keep
repeating it, repetition, and then look at it and make changes. What else? Yes?
For me, I read something and then I write, I put it away and then I write down what I know. And then I go back to the text and I use a different color. And then I write what I miss. And then I do it again until I have all of it.
Ooh, this one is actually quite good. So read it, write it down, put it away, write it down in your own words in a particular color, come back, you look at it again, add whatever it is using a different color pen, right? So that's good. What else? Yes?
Good sleep.
Good sleep, but I mean things that you try to have good sleep, but what do you do to help you memorize and retain things? It is a bio class, so and it's about the exam, so in some ways that's important to learn how to study things that you need to remember contents. Yes?
First, I learned something. For example, I'm saying an example that I use always. If I hear your lesson on let's say on classification or all of all of chapter 1, I'll take that, so I'll be okay, I have classification of this many kingdoms, I have these 3 domains, underneath this, that. I'll keep that in mind. The next day and for days following, I'll refer back to it's okay, Mr. Cheng on Monday taught me this. And then it's I repeat everything I know in my head, similar to what Keely said. But I just think about it.
Okay. So you're trying to recall the information in the consecutive number of days for repetition, but in some ways in your own ways. Okay? So that's good. Now, the last one?
I read something and then I try to understand it before I go and dive into my notes because I tend to memorize it better if I understand it because it connects a lot.
True. Yes, so make sure you seek understanding first, and then you try to memorize it. Okay, that's good. Yes?
So I try to connect my understanding to real life examples, because then you can in the task, if you see something that you don't really understand, but then if you connect it to something, if you remember a specific something, you can kind of go back to it.
Yes, you can kind of link something to that you know in real life, and then in some ways you can use that almost as a trigger to help you recall that information on the tests. Okay, that's good. Now, a couple of things that when I was asking the same question with the other class was that some people were saying if it is a process that they need to memorize, what they'll do is they'll draw out or write out a flow chart. Okay. Sometimes people will do a mind map of information. So let's just say a core topic, let's just say classification. So our various different things are connected to it. They're going to write that down, and then any other minor points, then making it into a mind map. So that's one way to do it. In some ways, making flow charts and mind map is actually good because our brain remembers words better or pictures better. Pictures better. That's why you remember someone's face, but you typically take a longer time to remember their name. Okay? Some people say write down the notes in their own words. Okay, very similar to what Keely was saying earlier. Okay. Now, a couple of things here. Look up. A couple of things here is this. Research have shown us repetition is important, but repetition, listen, this is the key. Same information, but different format. Same information, but different format. Okay? Because if you are looking at the same information at the same format over and over again, your brain will tune out. Your brain will tune out. Oh, I've seen this before. I can do it, look at it almost autopilot without thinking, but you're not really taking in the information. When you are, let's just say, looking at the same information in a slightly different format, doing it differently, looking at the diagram, whatever it is, typically your brain will look at it. It's like, oh, wait, this looked like something new. And what they're going to do, your brain's going to do is they're going to look at the information, make connections to what you previously have learned. And so it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so it looks different, but it's something that I've seen before and making connections. And it is these type of repetition of slightly different formats. This will help you on not just making sure the information is in your head, but recalling it on the day of the test. Recalling on the day of the test. How many times you've gone through a test, during a test, it's like, I can't remember during the test. And then later on that afternoon, oh yeah. How many times, how many of you have gone through that? Okay? More than, yeah, there's quite few of you who have done that. So it's about the recall during the test time too. So make sure so this information here is something we've learned. Again, we're going to see it again, slightly different formats. Now, when you're reviewing for the material for the exam next week, make sure you try to do the same thing. Read your notes. You can read your textbook, make your own notes. I'll also try to find some resource to help you guys on that one too. Okay, so coming back. So transport in vascular plants, so water and mineral. So we're talking about transpiration, okay? This word here is very messy looking. Oh, yay. So in here, this case here, this is transpiration. Okay. So remember transpiration, we're talking about the path of mechanism of moving water in any dissolved minerals from the roots up to the top of the tree. Why is it important to go up to the top of the tree? Why is it important for transpiration? Why is it important to bring water and mineral to the top of the tree? Yes?
Because the top person can get dehydrated the fastest?
Not necessarily. Yes?
Most light, so you can produce more photosynthesis.
Perhaps. Which part of the tree, which direction do trees tend to grow? Up. Okay. If that part is not alive because it's dehydrated, there's not enough water going up there, that part will die, then the tree is not going to keep growing. Okay. Think of it that way. So it's the most important part of transpiration. Get water and mineral to the tops of trees. Make sure you write that down. Make sure you write that down. Okay? Get water to the top of the trees. Okay? So, Now, water and dissolved mineral absorbed by root cells. Okay. Now, root cells, you have two separate parts. You have root hair, and then you have epidermis cells. So basically, think of the surface of the root. Okay. Now, the water mineral, you have two possible path to either diffuse directly into the cell, so we'll move through the cytoplasm from the cortex to the cortex all the way to the middle, or you go through the porous cell wall. Okay. Either way, eventually it gets into the xylem. The xylem, remember, this is in the stem. This is in the stem of the cell, of the plant, in the stem of the plant. Okay? Now, when water goes through the xylem, we're going to skip this part here. It's not as important. Now, water and dissolved mineral will go up the stem to the leaves through the xylem. Okay? Transpiration is a long-distance transport of water from the roots to the leaves, the top of the tree, because it creates a huge difference in pressure between the two locations in plants. Okay? Two locations in plants. Now, water evaporates through the stomata or the stoma. The same thing as a stoma as we talk about. Remember, stoma is are the little pores on the bottom side of the leaf. This is where gas exchange happen. CO2 goes in, O2 and some water vapor will leave. Okay, so this is where the water vapor leaves. So it creates what you call a pressure gradient. There's less of a water pressure up there than down in the roots. So in this case, this pressure gradient causes water to be pulled upwards towards the leaf. Now, look up here. Remember back in March, I kind of did a little demo with you guys. I got a few volunteers to stand over there, and you guys have to like hold hands or link hands. And then on one end, I'm kind of pulling the person right next to me, and the rest of you just kept pulling. Do you guys remember that? Who were the volunteers symbolize? Water molecules. Thank you. Water molecules, they are attracted to each other because of hydrogen bonds. That is what you call the cohesive property of water. Okay? Water molecules attract to each other because of hydrogen bonds. So in some ways, at the leaves on the top of the plants, the water molecules exit the leaves through the stoma, and at the same time basically pulls the next water molecule up from the stem and then from the root up. Okay, the whole chain is getting pulled. Just like I pulled one person, the whole chain of people are getting pulled towards me. You guys see that? Okay. So, why is it the pull? There's a column of water molecules inside the xylem. Okay. Water molecules are attracted to each other. Now, attracted to each other, this is what you call the cohesive property, but also attracted to the cell wall of the xylem, the adhesive property. Cohesive property, adhesive property. So in this case, when one water molecule transport out, each water molecule pull the next one upwards. Are we good? No. Don't worry about this point here. You will see this in grade 12 when you're talking about plant cells, but right now we'll just leave that now. Are we good? Okay, so that is the transpiration, the water and mineral getting transported. Now, transportation, the transport of vascular in vascular plant, the sugar. Okay, again, remember in our class right now, we're only looking at sugar. Just like in the demo I showed you and I talked to you guys about frankincense, a lot of these other molecules that is produced in other part of the leaves, other part of the tree, it would be transported through the same mechanism. It will be transported through the same mechanism. So in this case, we're only looking at sugar in this sense, but do keep in mind there are other things going through the same method. Okay. So when we are looking at sugars in plants, we're going to focus on glucose. It's a type of sugar, usually used as energy source. Now, starch is how plants store their extra or excess sugar. Okay, they make sugar through photosynthesis. They would use some of those sugar because of cellular respiration, but they have extras. They store that as starch. Now, sugar is transported. Now, if you think about it, water is from root to the top. Sugar is from source to sink. Source cells to sink cells. What on earth does that mean? Source cells will be the places where there's a lot of sugar, like leaves during summer, or wherever they're storing their excess sugars, okay, storage areas, wherever it is in the plant, that's where those will be the source. The sink would be where the plant have low level sugars and actually using those sugars. So any growing shoots, for example, okay, growing shoots, they're not really doing that much photosynthesis. They're using that energy to grow. Root hair, well, they can't possibly do photosynthesis, and root hair do expand. So that will be a sink, for example. Now, sugar are transported up and down the phloem depending on the time of the year. I briefly talked to you guys about this back in March, but in Canada, we have a particular time period where people collect tree sap to make maple syrup. Anyone happen to remember when? Not autumn. April or March, basically early spring. Maple syrup, the season for maple syrup, the sap runs when during daytime is above 0, but at night it has to go back below 0. In terms of the exact science of it, I don't know. I can ask my friends and families who actually do that for business. But aside from that, so it's really spring and summer. Now we're going to look at the two different times. Spring, early spring, before there are leaves. Summer, when there are leaves. Now I'm going to show you a diagram. I draw it myself. Please don't laugh at it. Okay, I'm a science teacher and not an art teacher. So here's my diagram of a tree. What's that? So it does the job. Okay? So you can draw your own tree whatever way you want. You can draw it like the tree in Totoro if you want to. The Kempor tree. Okay, so now in early spring, in early spring, before the leaves started sprouting yet, before the leaves are sprouted, the direction of the sugar will be flowing from the root to the leaves. From the root to the leaves. Okay? The root will be the source because, you know what? Early spring, there's no leaves yet. They're about to be sprout or they're sprouting. So there's not really quite photosynthesis yet. So the sugar would have been stored in the roots or in the bottom part of the tree as a storage throughout winter. So early spring, the direction of the sugar will go from root to top, okay? Root upwards because there's growing leaves are up there. During summertime, when leaves are there, they're fully mature, photosynthesis is at full swing, then it's different. The sugar will go from the leaves, from the top of the tree, down to the roots because they are actually making sugar now. Okay? So that would be a diagram of the information flow, of the sugar flow. Yes, you may. Are we good? Questions? All right. Now, in terms of the mechanism of sugar transport, okay, you actually have the same diagram, or you have a similar diagram in your textbook as well as the notes back in March. I'm just gonna use the one in the textbook. So let's look through here, and I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit. All right, so now phloem and xylem are right next to each other. Phloem and xylem are right next to each other. Do keep in mind, a growing plant, a living plant, requires water to be everywhere. Remember, living cells need water. So yes, xylem will transport the water up xylem will transport the water from the roots to the top, but at the same time, the water will leave the xylem to various parts of the tree. Okay, it would also go into the phloem. Now, top part of the tree, roots of the tree. Okay, top part of the tree, roots of the tree. So we start off at the source. Okay, we start off the source. So in this diagram, it's the leaves, summertime, photosynthesis, full swing. It's making tons of sugar. The sugar will go from the source cells through this companion cell into the phloem. Now, do remember the phloem, it's a living tissue, so it will have water. Okay, it's living inside a living organism. It will have water. That sugar will dissolve into the water, and then throughout the phloem, now, water goes one way, up. Phloem, sugar in phloem will go both up and down, depending where it's needed. Okay, will go up and down. Now, the ones that goes to the bottom, let's just say the sink is a root here, goes down to the bottom. The sugar, along with the water that's dissolved in, flow down the phloem to the bottom. The sugar will exit. Okay, exit through the companion cell and then to the sink, and then to the sink. After that, the water will move back to the xylem, and then the whole transpiration will go up again. Okay, so the transport of sugar as well as water and minerals are a linked together system. Okay, water goes from root to the top of the tree to the leaves through the xylem. Sugar created at the leaves, let's just say, or the source, go past the companion cell, get into the phloem, dissolve into the water, into phloem, gets transported up or down. We're only looking in this diagram downward to the roots. So it goes down here, and the sugar will exit through the companion cell, through to the sink cell, and then the water will go back to the xylem and get transported up. Are we good? So that is the mechanism of sugar transport, okay, in terms of from source to the sink. Question so far? Yes. Ooh, good question. It's page 569. Thank you for asking that question. That's a good question. Figure 9. Okay. Figure 9, page 569. Are we good? All right. So put that one away. Now, the very important part of the lesson is really, the very important part of this plant unit is really looking at the transpiration process. The process of moving water as well as nutrients up and down the plants. Okay, up and down the plants. That is the very important part. These two parts here, the stems as well as the roots, it almost like set the stage of how the transpiration process will go. You don't need to know every single detail about it, okay? You don't need to know every single detail about it. It's mostly the transpiration, and it helps you understand the transpiration a little bit better. Are we good? Now, so okay, so plant stems. Okay, In this one, don't worry about the designing experiment. We're not doing it. We've already done a seed germination lab already. Okay. Monocots and dicots. We briefly talked about it yesterday. Basically, we can separate a lot of the plants into two different groups. Okay, flowering plants into two different groups: monocots and dicots. Remember the monocots? You only have one of this structure. Called, was it? How did the Google Translate pronounce it for us yesterday again? Caudal, what was it?
Cotyledon.
Cotyledon?
Cotyledon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cotyledon.
So basically, monocot seeds have only one of this. And in this case, when it sprout, it became the first leaves, okay, the first part here. Whereas in terms of the dicot, you actually have two of those. So that's the first two parts that will sprout out. It's not quite the leaves, but it is almost like the first part of it. Now, why is this so important? Because it's related to the stems, okay, stem of the leaf. Now, a couple of things. This slide here basically talk about what is the function of stems. Okay, connective tissue from roots to the top part of the tree. Okay, transport of fluids, supporting and raising the trees or the leaves. Some species, this is interesting. Okay, some species it's modified to store the water. Okay, or carbohydrate like cacti. Also, stems of many species have adaptation to help protect the plants from injury and herbivores. Okay, everyone look up. Name me a mechanism of how plants can protect themselves from herbivores and insects. Put up your hand before you speak. Put up your hand before you speak.
Spiciness.
Yes, spiciness. Toxin.
Hard shells.
Seeds, yes. Some fruits, yes.
Like a rose picks, a little sharp thing.
Thorns, thank you. Thorns.
Bad smell.
What?
Bad smell. If it smells repulsive enough for certain things, they won't go.
Yes, there are some. There are some plants that do that. That's not the main ones, though. Don't write down the test. Okay. Excuse me. Or spikes, for example, very spiky leaves or spiky spines. So this here, you can see this tree here. It has quite a bit of thorns on their trees. Okay. Quite a bit. Wild roses have tons of thorns. Now, acacia tree also have a lot of thorns. So basically, structure-wise, stems basically two types: herbaceous stems and woody stems. Okay, herbaceous stems, it doesn't really contain any wood. Woody plants would actually, the stems would become woody. Now this here, monocots don't produce wood. Interesting. They have, but some have tissues that have similar function, like palm or bamboo stem. So if you look here, this is a picture of bamboo tree. The leaves here, as you can see, these are monocots. Okay, these are monocots. The leaves are just straight veins throughout, but it doesn't have wood the same way as we understand wood. Now, in terms of stems, if you look at a herbaceous plant, so let's just say a flower, for example. You look at monocots, you have vascular bundles. Vascular bundles, remember from our lesson on the leaf structure, you have xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem. So in this case, the vascular bundle will be throughout the whole tissue. So if you look down here, one slide down, so this here would be an example of the stem cut of a monocot plant. So these vascular bundles are all over the place. That's for monocot. For dicot plants, they will form rings. Okay, these vascular bundles will form rings. Okay. I'm going to skip this part, the woody stem part. Growth rings. Growth rings. So if you take a look here, growth rings only happen during spring and summer. That's really the time when the tree is growing. So if you look here, during springtime, it produces a, oh yeah, it's color, it's funny. It produces a relatively light color wood, so that's called spring wood. During summertime, you have a layer of darker wood known as summer wood. So together, that's a tree ring. So look at this picture here. Not this one. So if you look at this diagram here, one tree ring would be from a black ring to another black ring. That will be the lighter color, that's a spring wood. The darker, that one thin layer, that will be the summer wood. Okay? So that's 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. Okay? Rate 10 science, climate change, tree ring. What does tree ring tell us about climate change? Yes.
The number of years, how old the tree is.
Well, how old the tree is? Yes, but how does it relate to climate change? How is that a proxy record of climate change? Yes.
It talks sort of about like the amount of water access. So like if there's a drought and stuff, the rings I think will be thinner, and then if there's more water, the ring will be like bigger.
Okay, good. Wow, impressive. So in this case, if the tree that year don't have a lot of rain, of course it's not going to grow that much. The tree ring will be thinner. Lots of rain, lots of growth. The tree ring will be wider that year. So if you look at this here, you can see this year the tree ring is relatively skinnier, thinner. The tree didn't really grow that much. So this year would be a drought year or drier year compared to, let's just say, this year. This particular ring, look how much wider it is compared to this one. So that year, the tree received a lot of water. So in this case, it was able to grow a lot more. You guys good? Now, this is an important part. Okay, vascular tissue. No, remember xylem. In the vascular tissue, you have xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem. Now, we talked about ligament back in March. Remember, I brought a whole bunch of plastic straws bundled up together, and I basically said this is how xylem kind of works. You have a whole bundle of straws, and I talked about the paper straws that we now have, right? What's the annoying? I know it's environmentally more friendlier and it's better, but as a user, what's an annoying thing about paper straws? Yes, it gets soggy and doesn't work anymore, right? Now, think of xylem is like it's a similar job. Water goes through it, it's always soaked in water. If there's no special things added to the structure, it's going to get soggy and it's going to collapse. So it has ligament, okay? This molecule, this particular carbohydrate will strengthen and fortify the walls of the xylem so that they would act more like the plastic straws that I brought in as a demo, okay? That is important. That's basically, don't worry about that. Yeah, we're going to skip that. Don't worry about it. Okay. About roots. Now, in terms of root systems, again, in terms of structure of the roots, I think one thing, this slide really, it's the function of the slide. What is the root function is about the plants keeping up, right, absorbing water and nutrients. Remember, we're trying to keep up, bring it back to the transpiration process. Okay. Some roots do store water and carbs for the plants. And the roots. Nope. Yeah. So I will say, where's that one point I wasn't really want to talk about? Tap roots. So in terms of using a tap root system would be the one, think of like a carrot. Think of a carrot. Carrots usually have like smaller, one really thick root, and then you have a few fibers spreading out from it. That would be like a tap root system. So in this case, in the taproot system, a lot of times they will have, so you have one thick root, you also have microscopic hair-like outgrowth. So the whole idea of this is to really increasing the surface area to absorb the water and the minerals so that it can absorb more water faster. Okay? Again, is that concept in biology?
Just a quick reminder that there will be a mandatory photo club meeting today, tomorrow, Thursday, June 15th, 2023, to collect all equipment that has been signed out during the photo club this semester. The meeting will be tomorrow, June